Welcome to Fine is a four-letter word. My guest today is Yvonne Marchese. I got it right.
You got it right.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Lori. It's
We
awesome
are
to be with
laughing
you.
because we were just cracking each other up before I even hit record. So this is going to be a good episode.
Oh my goodness. Watch out.
Tell me, so I got the name right, but you just told me this story. Tell me the story of when you moved to New York, and then I'll get into asking the question I always start with.
Oh my goodness. So my name looks like Marchese, first of all. And I grew up in El Paso, Texas, which is as far west as you can go in Texas without falling into New Mexico or Mexico. And there were no Marcheses where I grew up until a certain point in time when we realized there was another Marchese in town, and we were like, whoa, there's another Marchese in town. And he had exactly the same name as my dad, Frank Marchese. We were like, what are the chances? So anyway, grew up spelling my name for people, pronouncing my name for people if they saw it in print first, the whole thing. I grew up also wanting to be an actress and wanting to move to New York City when I was older. Oh my gosh, that was my big dream. And I finally did that in my 20s. And I remember going to the DMV, and I was so excited to get my license. And I show up to the DMV, and she says, "What's your last name?" And I said, "Marchese." And I started to spell it. And she was like, "I know how to spell it." And I was like, I am home. I have arrived.
This is my place. These are my people.
Yep.
That's
there you go.
Awesome. So speaking of growing up, that leads right into that first question of what are the values and beliefs that you were raised with that contributed to you becoming who you became as a young adult and who you've now developed into?
Yeah. You know what? I think whenever somebody asks me that question, Lori, the first thing that comes to my mind is work ethic. My parents are very much, they believe in you work hard, you get what you work for kind of thing. And my dad grew up in Poughkeepsie, New York. He was a houseboy for a number of. My grandfather was on my dad's side was a milkman. Delivered milk the old-fashioned way with a horse and buggy, and
Oh,
my
wow.
dad worked with him on the back of that and helped with the horse, all these things. And they work was just really, my dad was like, don't be afraid to scrub a toilet. I remember him saying that a lot. And my mom worked the whole time that I was growing up. She didn't want to be a working mom. It was out of necessity. So she really would have preferred to be a stay-at-home mom. But I did watch her go and do that. I also watched her go back to school when she was in her 40s to get her associate's degree, because education was also important to my parents. Neither of them had a college degree in the end. They didn't have the bachelor's, but they did feel like education was really important and encouraged us to work hard to get the good grades. My dad was always like, "Do you want to be digging ditches?" Remember that coming up a lot. I think he didn't have a thing about, he's not worried about scrubbing toilets, but he did not want to dig ditches.
Okay. Right. There's a line I am not willing to cross. I work inside, not outside.
That's exactly it. He was loved men's clothing, loved the finer things in life, and he actually sold really high-end men's clothing, and he had his own store for a while, but he also was a general manager of a men's suit. He sold like all the big muckety mucks in town came to him to buy their suits and stuff like that.
So I gotta ask now, is that why he moved to El Paso? Because you just said he grew up in New York.
Yeah.
But you grew up in El Paso.
Yeah.
And he was selling men's clothing, which I don't think of El Paso as like the mecca for high fashion.
No. So my dad was, he served in the military after the Korean War, and ended up when he left, he actually served in Japan though. So go figure. So once he was done in Japan, they sent him to Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas, and he loved the sunshine and the weather. He loved golf. So basically, he stayed for the golf. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. All
He
right.
did golf every day. He was like, if I never have to shovel snow again in my life, again, not, he liked to be outdoors to play golf, but that was about it for my dad.
Okay. All right. All good. And so then how did that work ethic and value of education play out in your life? Cuz like did you go to college?
I did. I ended up staying home to go to college. Worked my way through school. I got my degree in theater, and I worked full time as a waitress the whole time I was doing that. So I would get up and go to work in the mornings, and then go to class, and then go to rehearsals, and then go study, and then sleep for a little bit, and get up and do the same thing the next day. So that was college for me.
How did you get yourself to New York? Like you said, that was always a dream to get to do that.
Yeah.
Did you just one day go, all right, I'm following this dream. Here I go.
Yeah, that could be a longer story, Lori. So I got married too young, let's just say. Right after I graduated from college, I married a guy that I had been friends with in high school, and we had connected again my last year of college. And I had always had a crush on him from like the moment I met him, but I had a boyfriend in high school also. We just never connected in that way, but we were really good friends. He taught me how to drive a stick shift.
Important skill.
Great guy. And we ended up, falling in love, getting married. He wanted to be a police officer. And so when it came time to figure out where I was going after school, I was hesitant to have him move to New York to be a police officer in New York, even though that's where I really wanted to go. But we thought, oh, well, let's try Denver. Go figure. Let's try Denver. Denver seems like a great place to live, and maybe that'll be that. I ended up going to Denver, and I did a lot of theater in Denver. I did a lot of really fun, amazing. When I was there was a great theater scene there that was not professional theater, but it was, I would say, a step above community. There was some really good work going on in town, and I started working right away, and showed it. So I worked whatever job I was at during the day, and then I went and did theater at night. And the marriage started to suffer because I wasn't around much. There were other issues there too, and in the end, he didn't really like me doing theater, even though he knew that was what I had always wanted to do. And so eventually I was like, it's time. And so we divorced, and I spent a year working to save enough money to move to New York, studying up on New York. Like, I didn't know anybody there. I didn't know anything about it, and I didn't have a job lined up. So I did a lot of research on what it was like to be an actor in New York and what I could expect. I sold everything I owned and put my cat in the car with me, and drove across country to Maine. Go figure. Because again, I didn't have a place lined up in New York yet. So my aunt said, come to Maine, where we are, and you can stay with us for a little bit while you look. And I was like, all right, that sounds great. So I did. I stayed with them for a month, went and visited the one person I knew in New York who was a playwright whose plays I'd done in Denver. He and his wife graciously put me up for a week in their loft bed of their living room in the Greenwich Village. And I hit the streets that week and found a roommate through a roommate service. It was crazy. And I found the best roommate a person could possibly have. I mean, everything just fell into place.
That is when you know you're doing the right thing, right? Like everything's lining up, and that just is like the universe saying you're on the right track. Keep going.
Yeah, it definitely did. And once I actually made the move into the city, I instantly got into a show. I got a temp job working as a receptionist. I had no administrative skills at this point in my life. I was actually afraid of computers and tech and anything having to do with any of that. But I got this job as a receptionist because somebody was out on maternity leave. That turned into the guy moving to another location and taking me with him as an admin. And I was like, okay, I know nothing about being a secretary. Are you sure you want me?
Uh-huh.
And he was like, yep, you'll learn. Come with me. And that was how my entry into New York went. It was like charmed. It was
Yeah.
charmed.
Well, yes. And backing up, like, yes, everything was falling into place because you were on the right path and you had to take all of those actions. You didn't just get to your friend's house in New York, in Greenwich Village, and sit there waiting for opportunities to show up for you. You were out hustling, which, I'm not a big fan of the hustle and grind, but you were taking inspired action, which is different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
so
was living the dream, Lori.
yeah.
Literally living the dream.
Right. So you were excited to be taking the actions.
Oh, yeah.
That's, again, another sign of when you're on the right path for you, you're excited to take the actions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, since the show is called Fine is a 4-letter word, I want to skip ahead a bit to the time in your life when, there's been several, obviously, when you were in the first marriage, everything was fine for a little while until it wasn't. But the story that we talked about, because you became, you didn't stay a secretary for the whole time. You're a photographer.
No. When you're an actor, you cobble together these little survival jobs so that you can go do what you really want to do.
Yeah.
And so, I worked my way up. I eventually ended up being, a personal assistant to a CEO of a hedge fund. But he let me go out and audition. And I even left for a couple of months and went and did a summer's worth of theater somewhere in New Jersey. You know what I mean? I don't know. I did the jobs that allowed me to do what I really wanted to do. And so my experience was all over the place, and anything that I learned on the job. It was crazy.
Did you ever feel like when you were doing that, maybe this acting thing isn't going to work out and I should just really focus on this main thing that I'm doing?
No, until I was done with acting. And that was because of motherhood. Motherhood changed me essentially. I met my current husband, my second good chance. I met him on tour. We did a national tour of basically The Miracle Worker. And we traveled the whole country for 3.5 months. And then we both were pursuing acting careers. We were together for 5 years before we got married. By then I was in my mid-30s, and my love of theater had become tainted with this whole pursuit of having to audition, always being at the beck and call of, do I need to be available for a project? I didn't feel like I could go on a vacation. I didn't feel like I could cut my hair, because if I cut my hair, I'd have to go get new headshots.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah. And all the things that I had loved about doing theater when I was in Denver, those had all kind of been tainted with the idea of suddenly trying to make a living at it.
Right. Which you hear a lot from professional athletes, for example. Like, they play for the love of the game, but then once they turn pro, now it's a job.
Yeah.
It's not as fun anymore.
Yeah. And the job is actually auditioning. The job isn't doing theater. The job is going and hoping that somebody will give you the chance to do theater. Anyway, so we ended up getting married. And he went down, we went down to grad school after we had our first child. Our first one was 8 months old when we went down to DC, and he got a graduate degree in classical acting. And when he was done with that program, which was an intensive 1-year program, I went out and started auditioning again. And I would get a call back for a show, and then he was getting callbacks for shows. And I realized, I was like, I'm done. I'm done. I don't want to put my energy here. I had put all my energy into that. And it's a good bit of energy. And to get out and get productions, to learn lines, to do things the way I love to do them. I realized I did not have that energy to give anymore. And I really wanted to give it over to being a mom.
Mhm.
But then I was like, who am I?
Who am I? Do you remember that line from The Breakfast Club when they're sitting and it's what's that guy's name? I can picture him, the one with the red hair, and he was sitting with the pen on his lip because they had to write those essays, and he's like, "Who am I? Who am I?" Every time I hear that somebody say, "I was questioning who am I?" think of The Breakfast Club.
Oh my gosh, I love that movie. We just watched it again recently, and I'm having a hard time remembering his name too.
Michael Hall, Anthony Michael Hall.
Anthony Michael Hall. Yes. Yeah, I had a massive what's the thing when you don't know who you are? What's that word?
Identity crisis.
Yes, I had a massive identity crisis when I stopped doing theater and suddenly became a mom. And I was like, I had always known.
Mm-hmm.
I'd always known what I wanted to do and put every bit of my energy into that. And suddenly I was like, I love being a mom, but I knew that wasn't everything.
Yeah.
And so there was this like, what is there about Yvonne just as a person? Like, who am I? What am I? I don't know. What ended up happening is that I was doing some work from home stuff to cobble together some money while he was in grad school. And then when we came, just all that, we had our second child. And that then was like, oh, I can't work from home when they nap anymore because there's two of them on different nap schedules. This is not working. So I went back and got a full-time job. And it was, again, a survival job. And I got promoted within, like, I was there for 4 months, 3 months there, promoted for the last month, and laid off in 2008 when everything tanked. And I came home from that, and I was like, I remember it was Halloween. I was like, turned to my husband. I'm like, what am I going to be when I grow up? And he said, you're going to figure it out. And this is after like 5 years of asking myself this question, right?
Yeah, it's not, a lot of people go through that. And I think a lot of people don't realize that that it's common. Like people feel like I'm the only one going through this. Why can't I figure this out?
Yeah.
What's wrong with me that I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up? But it's so common.
Oh, it's horrible. It was not an easy journey. And but what literally happened, Lori, is I woke up the next morning and I turned to my husband and I said, photography. I want to be a photographer. It came out of nowhere. And he was like, okay. And I had been trying to take good pictures with my little point and shoot camera and failing miserably, because I knew what I liked and I wasn't able to do it.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay. And we had a little bit of credit left on our credit card. I bought my first real camera. I enrolled in a study from home program, and I went on a massive job search so we could make money and find another survival job. But I started doing photography, and that saved me because suddenly I could make something I thought was beautiful. After I learned, I could make beautiful photos without a gatekeeper, without somebody having to cast me in a part. I could pick up my camera anytime I wanted to and point it at something and try to take a good picture and practice my craft on my own. You can't do that as an actor.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't do that in a lot of different occupations where you're waiting for somebody else to choose you.
Yeah.
Now you could choose yourself.
Right. Whether or not I was making money at it didn't matter. It was
right. And still be creative, which is probably what your soul was longing for.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I know now, so I'm gonna fast forward us, Lori, to a little bit later on, because I was 40 when that happened. And I slowly worked on the side, doing a little side gig thing with the photography. Finally got to the point where I went full time, and that took me like somewhere between 6 and 8 years. I don't know. And so now I'm 48. I've got my full-time photography business. I'm doing what I love. And still there was something missing and I didn't know what it was. And I was tired all the time and maybe a little angry and a little depressed. And there was just, I didn't want to get up in the morning. And I would hit the snooze button, and then we'd be late getting my kids to school, and I'd be yelling at them because they're late. And I'm like, well, who's the real problem here? That hit me one day. And
that was before Taylor Swift wrote the song.
Right.
It's me. I'm the problem. It's me.
Right. And it was one morning, and we were running late, and I'm yelling at my kid, "Where's your backpack? Where's your lunchbox? Come on, let's go." By the time we got down to the car, I looked in the rearview mirror and I saw that he had big fat tears in his eyes. And I was like, wow, I'm the one having a tantrum here. And I'm almost 50 years old. Why don't I have my shit together? What is wrong with me? And wow. And so my husband, God bless him. At one point, you know, it wasn't the same day probably, but not too far from that, I started doing a lot of self-helpy stuff, right? And he's like, hey, I heard this great Audible book by this woman, Mel Robbins, called The 5-Second Rule. You should listen to it, you know? So we had the account. So I'm like, okay. And I was like, oh, and she's talking about not hitting the snooze button. And so much of like what she was talking about, I could completely relate to. And I thought, okay, maybe I'm going to stop hitting the no, maybe
Yeah.
I'm going to stop hitting the snooze button. I'm going to try a 30-day experiment of getting up before my kids every day. I'm going to meditate finally, because I'd always intended to meditate every day, but never did. I'm going to finally do yoga or some form of exercise every day, because I've been fooling myself about how much I was exercising. I thought I was exercising, but I really wasn't. I was like, okay, 30 days of this time.
I belong to a gym, but I never go.
Right. 30 days. Let's just see what 30 days does. Who knows? And it was really hard because I am not a morning person. Let me just say that. And, but I did it, and I set the alarm across the room. And after a couple of weeks, I actually started feeling pretty good. And I don't know how long it was before my son, the same son in the back of the car with the big fat crocodile tears. I went to wake him up one morning, and he said, "You seem happier, Mom." And I was like, he had no idea what I was doing. And that was everything I needed to hear to say, okay, you're on the right path.
Yeah. What did you do? So you just mentioned a bunch of things that you were going to start doing in the 30 days. So you put the alarm clock on the other side of the room and you woke up on time. But did you also, like, were you, I'm meditating during those 30 days. I'm doing yoga. I'm working out. Like, cause that's like a lot of stuff. Some people would feel overwhelmed with that much of doing all of those things at one time.
The meditation and the exercise really isn't that much. So I would do 20 minutes of meditation. I got up an hour before my kids, basically. So I would meditate for anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, depending on how much time I actually had. And then I would move my body somehow. So that was my commitment to myself. Move your body, meditate.
Okay.
And those two things, essentially, there were some other things I started to niggle with too, like journaling and affirmations and visualizations. And some of that all fit in while the exercise was happening. And you know what I mean? So it was just like, I was throwing all the stuff at it, you know, in that morning routine. But it was working. I kept going with it, and I didn't feel overwhelmed with it because I felt better. Yeah. And this is the crazy thing, is that when I started to feel better, I was like, oh, I feel better now that I'm almost 50 than I felt all through my 40s. I have more energy. I feel I'm excited. Like now I'm kind of looking at my next 20 or 30 years and kind of going, I wonder what's next. Like
Yeah, what else is possible?
Not like, what am I going to be when I grow up?
Uh-huh.
But like, ooh, what am I going to be when I grow up? Like,
Yeah, like you're okay with not knowing because you know it's going to be good, whatever it is.
yeah, or it has that possibility at least. Like it was
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to want to do photography when I'm 70 or 80, at least not the way I do it now, because it's pretty physical, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
And so what else might I do? And when I started to get curious, I started going,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I was telling myself it was all over. I was telling myself I was too old and that I was a failure and that it was all downhill. And when I had that realization that I had all that trash talk in my head about my age and what was because I was looking in the mirror going, who the hell is that?
Yeah.
Who's that old lady? Because that's not me.
Right.
Right. And just horrified by like, and then I had bunions on my feet and bursitis in my shoulder. And it's all like old people stuff, Lord.
Well, wait a second. I've had bunions since like high school. So.
Oh, okay. See, but for me, I equated that with like, that's an old thing. And,
right. Because I remember my grandmother's feet were severely deformed, like toes going all the way sideways.
Oh, yeah. All this stuff started to come up in my 40s. And I was like, so for me, I equated that with, oh, yeah, I'm getting old. It's all downhill from here.
Yeah.
And when I realized that I was actually feeling better than I had for years, that was like hopeful to me. And when I realized, oh, it's this mental chatter going, nah, you're old. If I lose my phone or my keys, oh, I'm having a senior moment.
Right.
You know, and that kind of talk, they actually they're doing research now to show that fear of aging actually affects your health.
Yes. Yes, that makes complete sense. But most people accept like what you just said as like, well, that's just how it is. Like, oh, a senior moment. Like that's part of our vernacular and nobody questions it.
Right. And I started to question it. And then I got really excited and I started thinking, I wonder if other people feel the way I do. And what if I was listening to a ton of podcasts. Okay. So, right. Cause I was like trying to build my photography business. I was listening to podcasts about building a business, personal branding, cause I was doing personal branding photography for people, all this and self-help things and all the things, podcasts.
Yeah.
I was steeped in them, love them. And I was like, what if I did a podcast about this? What if other people are limiting themselves too? And 2 years it took me to do it because I was like, I don't know how to do a podcast. I don't have the money to pay somebody to edit or teach me how to do it. I'm a mom with kids that are pretty busy and I have a photography business that I need to grow. No. But what I really realized after 2 years was that the main thing limiting me was my own sense of who would want to listen to me and pure imposter syndrome. And when I realized that, I was like, okay, that's it. No, I can't. I have to, if this is what I'm going to draw the line in the sand and say that it doesn't matter if I have a successful podcast. What's going to matter here is what I learned from doing it and how I end up growing. And maybe I can help somebody else by telling other people's stories who felt like they were done and it was all over, or, you know, and found their way around that point in their life in midlife and have gone on to, you know, discover new things about themselves. So that was how the podcast got started.
Yeah, I love that because it's like paying attention to the thing that keeps coming up for you and keeps coming up, and it's not going to go away until you pay attention to it.
Oh my gosh, it wouldn't go away. It was like a little voice in the back of my head.
Hey, when are you starting that podcast? When are you starting that podcast? I had a similar story. It wasn't so much that I was afraid of, it wasn't like who's going to want to listen. It was sort of that, but it wasn't about the imposter syndrome stuff so much as where there are already so many podcasts. Yeah. How do I fit into the marketplace? And like, who's going to want to listen to another podcast? Not that it was about me, but like, there's already so much. Yes. But what I didn't realize is that most podcasts don't even survive past 7 episodes. So there are millions of podcasts that have been started, but not many that have made it to more than 100 episodes, which yours has too, right?
Yeah, I'm at 161.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
we're
it's
in
been over
rarefied
3 years.
air.
I know.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Lori. And while we pat ourselves on the back, I mean, I'll have to say, I don't know about you, but starting the podcast literally changed my life. It has made me realize that the entire time, the one through line through everything that I've loved doing, as far as being an actress, being a photographer, and now having a podcast, is that I am a storyteller. That is why I did theater. That is why I wanted to do theater, is to tell stories that change, where people can see themselves, and in seeing themselves, they can lead better lives, and it has led to me meeting people like you. It has led to me meeting a bunch of other people who are looking at aging with excitement and possibility, instead of that everything's downhill from here. I've started speaking. I just wrote a book. I'm like, who is this? Like, I was terrified of public speaking before I started the podcast.
Yeah.
The podcast was safe because there was no video. It was a one-on-one conversation with a guest. I'm telling their story. It wasn't about me. But now I'm like, I'm ready to go talk about this thing. I'm ready to talk about how ageism limits us when we are ageist to ourselves. I am like ready to get out in the world and just talk about this thing.
Right. That's the key thing you just said, is when we tell ourselves these stories. Like, I don't believe that something out there is limiting people who are in their 40s and 50s, the Gen X or older. I hear a lot of people talking about ageism, and I haven't experienced it. I don't feel like I've experienced it. I don't know how much of that is other people putting the stuff on us versus us putting it on us.
I have to say, I think it's both. And you have to understand that I'm coming from a career where once you're past, especially as a female performer, once you're past your early 20s, you are on the downhill slope. And so there is that, but it's not just that. Like, there was another job that I had, I was let go from. They ended up hiring a much younger woman to take my place, who lived in Ohio. I live in Fairfield County, Connecticut, where things are expensive. They could pay her less and everything else. In the end, me getting laid off from that job, there was a touch of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I hear it, I've met other people this wonderful woman I met during the pandemic, she had lost her job, and it was all pandemic related, right? And she had a job hunt that went on for at least a year, and she was a highly, highly qualified person for the work that she was doing. And a lot of it's just harder. It is out there. It is out there because we're all so steeped in it that I think we don't even know when we're being ageist against other people and against ourselves.
Interesting. Yeah. I come back to, though, if we are looking at things as everything is happening for me,
yes,
then it changes our perspective on everything. So even if you are facing ageism and you look at it as, this is happening for me because it's giving you an opportunity maybe to go out on your own and do the thing that you've been wanting to do but have been afraid to.
100%.
And now you're not getting a job because the universe is directing you to do the thing.
I have decided that I am unemployable.
Yeah, me too.
And I take great pride in that now. Like, I am ready to step into whatever it's going to take for me to be an entrepreneur. I never thought of that myself that way before.
Yeah.
And here I am, 55 years old, going, okay, I am an entrepreneur. That I'm putting my flag in the ground and I'm staking that claim. And it's because I'm like, okay, for a while there, it was, I felt like I was too old for anybody to employ me. But now I've flipped that script.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we can do that, when we can flip the script,
Right.
that's where the power is.
Right. Exactly. I love that. And taking the responsibility, which I think a lot of people, and that's a whole other conversation we could get into. A lot of people don't want to have to take responsibility for themselves in any capacity, in terms of their health, in terms of their career, whatever. But that's the only way you really find the joy, is to take responsibility for finding the joy.
Yeah. It's uncomfortable.
Yes.
And I'll say this about getting older. I think my theory is that as we get older, we want less and less and less to be uncomfortable.
Well, sure, because we're tired of being uncomfortable, for God's sakes.
Right.
Can I just have it a little bit easier?
But that's where the juice is.
Yeah.
Like, if you can move through the discomfort and stay curious about what's possible or what's next, or, okay, I'm come up against a wall, instead of going, oh, this is happening to me. Look, maybe that's when, if you get curious, it's like, oh, what is in this for me?
Mm-hmm.
What can I learn from this? Like, if you can ever get curious about anything, I think it gives you power, you know?
Right. Right. Yes. Love it. This has been such a good conversation.
Oh my gosh.
We could be here all afternoon.
I know.
What
could talk to
is
forever.
the name of your podcast for my listeners?
It's called Late Bloomer Living.
Okay. And it's available on all the podcast apps.
Everywhere.
So once you finish listening to this, go add that, hit the follow button on mine, and then go over to Yvonne's and hit the follow button on hers. Okay.
I think that's great advice. Go do that, people.
Yes. Also, it would be great if you would leave a comment and a review.
Yeah.
I'll take that. Thank you very much.
Way to
All right.
ask for it. I love it.
If someone wants to continue a conversation with you, where do they find you? And then I got another question for you after that.
You can find me at Late Bloomer Living. I also have a community called the Age Agitators Club. I am the president of the Age Agitators Club.
Agitators. I freaking love that.
Yeah. So, I mean, my email's all over the place on there. And
Okay.
I love hearing from people. There's even a little place for people to go leave a message for me, like right there on the website. They can hit a little button and leave me a voicemail. Go do that.
Leave you a voicemail? I want that on my website.
Oh, it's really cool. It's called SpeakPipe.
Okay. I'm getting that.
Very easy widget to put on there.
Okay, cool. I'm just making a note over here of that. What's your hype song when you need that extra boost of energy?
Ooh. It pretty much anything by Pink. And I'm trying to think of the name of the song right now. Oh, let's just go with Raise Your Glass right now.
Raise your glass. Yeah. Yeah. Did you see her in concert?
No, I'm dying to see. I know.
She's still out. She's still out on tour.
I know. I am going to go see her because I want to see that woman fly. I want to see her flying over my head, man.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. She's amazing.
Yeah. She is actually one of my biggest heroes right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love Pink. I want to be Pink when I grow up.
Awesome. All right, Raise Your Glass. We'll go with that. But you know, the whole what's it called? Like repertoire, all of her songs.
Oh, I love her.
Yeah. I think if I was on a deserted island, she would have to be one of, if I could have like three. Tom Petty is up there at like number one, I think. And I never got to see him in concert, unfortunately. But Pink, I don't know. This could be a tie.
Brandy Carlisle too.
I saw her
this summer, and I was dying, but it was so expensive to get the tickets. I couldn't.
Yeah, she was amazing.
Justify spending it.
Yeah, I gotcha. I hear you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, very cool. Thank you so much for joining me today. Unfine is the 4-letter word.
Thank you so much, Lori. I loved being with you.
All right.